John Harrison was 72 years old and still carried himself like the successful construction company owner he had once been. Tall, broad-shouldered, silver hair neatly trimmed, he moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had built half the strip malls in central New Jersey with his own hands and his own money. When his wife Margaret passed away 5 years earlier, he sold the business for a sum that made his accountant smile for weeks. The money went into trusts, investments, and a few properties he kept quiet about. He didn't want his only daughter Emily or her husband Mark to think he was sitting on a fortune. He wanted to be loved for who he was, not what he had. Emily and Mark lived in a beautiful colonial house in Princeton, the kind with white columns and a circular driveway. After Margaret's funeral, Emily begged her father to move in with them. The house had a full in-law suite on the main floor, private entrance, its own kitchenette. It sounded perfect. John agreed because he missed family around him, and because Emily's eyes filled with tears when she asked. Mark shook his hand firmly and said all the right things. "Welcome home, Dad. We're glad you're here." The first year was good. John helped with the grandkids, drove them to soccer practice, fixed leaky faucets without being asked. He paid for a new roof when the old one started leaking and never mentioned the cost. Emily hugged him every morning. Mark called him sir and asked his opinion on stock picks even though John knew Mark thought old-school contractors didn't understand finance. Then things shifted slowly like ice melting on a lake you don't notice until someone falls through. Mark got promoted to vice president at his investment firm. They bought a Tesla and took a trip to Aspen. John stayed home with the kids and thought nothing of it. Mark started making comments at dinner. Little things at first. "Dad, you don't need to eat that much red meat at your age." Or "Dad, maybe it's time to downsize your old truck, it's taking up space in the driveway." John laughed them off. He parked the truck on the street. The comments grew sharper. Mark would sigh loudly when John watched baseball in the family room. "You know the game's on streaming now, Dad, no need for cable anymore." John paid for the cable. He kept quiet. Emily stopped hugging him in the mornings. She started saying things like, "Mark works so hard, Dad, maybe you could keep the volume lower." John bought wireless headphones. One evening Mark came home late smelling of whiskey and expensive cologne. John was in the kitchen making a sandwich. Mark leaned against the counter and said, "You know, John, this is my house. I pay the mortgage. Maybe it's time you thought about assisted living. There are some nice places in Florida. Warm all year round." John looked at him for a long moment. He said, "I'm not going anywhere, Mark. This is my daughter's home too, and she asked me to stay." Mark smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see about that, old man." After that, the campaign began. Mark started hiding the remote when John wanted to watch his shows. He moved John's chair to the corner. He told the housekeeper not to clean the in-law suite anymore, because Dad likes to do it himself. Emily never contradicted him. She just looked away. John's grandson Tyler, who was 15, started calling him old man too, copying his father. The little one Sarah still ran to him for stories, but even she whispered, "Grandpa, Daddy says you're in the way." John felt the walls closing in. He spent more time in his suite. He read books. He walked the neighborhood at dawn when no one was awake to complain. He thought about leaving, but where would he go? This was the only family he had left. One Saturday morning Mark cornered him in the garage. "Listen, John, I've been patient, but it's time. I found a place in Scottsdale. Great facilities. Golf course. Nurses on call. We'll even help pay the first year." John said, "I'm not moving, Mark." Mark stepped closer. "You're not hearing me. This isn't a request anymore. You're confused half the time. You forget things. It's not safe for you to live alone here." John almost laughed. He forgot nothing. He remembered every slight, every insult, every time Mark raised his voice when he thought John couldn't hear. That night John sat at his desk and opened his laptop. He logged into accounts Mark didn't know existed. He looked at property deeds Mark had never seen. He made phone calls to old friends who still owed him favors. The plan started forming. John had never told anyone the full truth about his wealth. When he sold Harrison Construction, he kept 10% of the shares in a separate entity. That company had grown quietly over the years, leasing equipment to bigger firms. It paid dividends every quarter into accounts offshore and onshore that only John and his lawyer knew about. There was also the lake house in New Hampshire no one in the family had visited in years because Mark always said it was too far. And the commercial building in Trenton that brought in steady rent. Total net worth just over $12 million. Mark thought John lived on Social Security and a small pension. John started moving money quietly. He paid off the mortgage on Emily and Mark's house, the one Mark bragged about paying himself. He did it through a trust so no one would know until he wanted them to. Then he called his lawyer Richard, an old Marine who didn't mess around. Richard, the first need you to prepare some documents. Revocable trust becomes irrevocable on my word. New will. Power of attorney revoked from Emily. Everything goes to the kids' education trust. And a charity for veterans if Emily and Mark are still married at my death. Richard didn't ask why. He just said consider it done. Summer came hot and sticky. Mark planned a big 4th of July party. Caterers, live band, fireworks over the backyard. He invited his entire office, his golf buddies, the neighbors he wanted to impress. He told John, you can watch from your room if the noise bothers you. John said, I'll be fine, Mark. The day of the party, John dressed in his best suit, the one he wore to Margaret's funeral. Navy blue Italian wool. He put on the watch Margaret gave him for their 40th anniversary. He walked into the backyard where 200 people drank champagne and ate lobster rolls. Mark saw him and frowned. Dad, what are you doing out here? This is for my colleagues. John smiled and kept walking. He found Emily near the pool. She looked beautiful in a white dress but tired around the eyes. Daddy, you okay? Better than ever, sweetheart. He kissed her cheek and moved toward the patio where Mark was holding court, telling a story about closing a big deal. John stepped up beside him and waited until there was a pause. Everyone, Mark said, raising his glass, may I have your attention? The crowd quieted. John spoke first, his voice carrying like it used to on construction sites. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming to my house today. A few laughs. People thought it was a joke. Mark's face reddened. Dad, what are you? John kept going. Many of you know my son-in-law Mark. He's done well for himself. Very proud of him. But I thought today was a good day to clear up a few things. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Mark, this is for you. Mark took it automatically. Open it, son. Mark opened the envelope. Inside was a deed. The house deed. Paid in full. Owner Harrison Family Trust. Trustee John Harrison. Mark's mouth opened but nothing came out. John turned to the crowd. Some of you might not know this, but I paid off the mortgage on this house last month. It's been in a trust for years. My trust. So technically we've all been guests in my home. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Mark found his voice. This is ridiculous. Dad, you're confused. We'll talk later. John smiled again. No confusion, Mark. Perfectly clear. And there's more. He pulled out his phone and tapped a few times. The outdoor speakers that had been playing soft jazz suddenly switched to a recording. Mark's voice filled the air. You're not hearing me, old man. This isn't a request anymore. You're confused half the time. You forget things. It's not safe for you to live alone here. Another clip. We'll even help pay the first year in Scottsdale. Another. Dad, maybe it's time to downsize your old truck. The crowd went silent. Mark went pale. John stopped the recording. I have hours of this, Mark. Every time you called me old man. Every time you threatened to put me in a home. Every time you told Emily I was a burden. Emily was crying now. John looked at her gently. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't want you to hear it this way. But I needed everyone to know the truth. He turned back to Mark. You have two choices. You can pack your things tonight and leave quietly. The locks will be changed tomorrow. Or you can stay and face the consequences of trying to elder abuse your way into thinking you own something that was never yours. Mark tried to bluster. You can't do this. We'll sue. John handed him another envelope. Restraining order filed this morning. Recording laws in New Jersey are one-party consent. All legal. My lawyer Richard is over there by the bar if you want to talk to him. Richard raised a glass in salute. The crowd started drifting away. No one wanted to be part of this anymore. Mark looked around for support and found none. His boss was already walking toward the gate, shaking his head. Emily grabbed John's arm. Daddy, please. We can work this out. John looked at her for a long time. Sweetheart, I love you. But you stood by while he treated me like garbage. You let him speak to me that way. You let him plan to ship me off. That hurts worse than anything he said. He softened. The house is yours if you want it. Divorce him and it's yours free and clear. Stay with him and you'll need to find somewhere else. The kids can visit me anytime. I'll never keep them from you. Emily sobbed into her hands. Mark stormed into the house. Guests left quickly after that. The caterers packed up in silence. John stood by the pool alone as the sun set. Fireworks started in the distance from the town display. Red and blue and gold lit the sky. He felt no triumph. Just sadness and relief mixed together. Mark left that night with 2 suitcases. He rented a condo downtown and started telling people his father-in-law had lost his mind to dementia. Some believed him. Most didn't after the recordings circulated among the neighbors. Emily stayed in the house with the kids. She filed for divorce 6 weeks later. Mark fought it bitterly, but he had no leverage. The prenup he insisted on years earlier now worked against him. He got little. John moved into the main part of the house again. He redecorated the in-law suite into a playroom for the grandkids. Tyler apologized one afternoon while shooting hoops in the driveway. "Grandpa, I was a jerk. I'm sorry." John hugged him. "We all make mistakes, son. Important thing is what we do after." Sarah never stopped loving him. She slept in his room some nights when nightmares came. Emily started therapy. She came to John one evening with coffee and tears. "I didn't see it, Daddy. Or I didn't want to see it. I was scared of losing the lifestyle. I was wrong." John held her hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." He didn't give the house to her right away. He made her earn it back slowly. She took a part-time job at a local school teaching art. She cooked dinners again. She listened when John spoke. A year later he signed the house over to her alone. Trust revised again. Kids' college funds protected no matter what. Mark tried to come back once. Showed up on Christmas Eve with gifts and excuses. John met him at the door. "You're not welcome here, Mark. Not now. Maybe not ever." Mark left without a word. John bought the lake house in New Hampshire back from the trust and spent summers there with Emily and the kids. He taught Tyler how to fish and Sarah how to skip stones. They roasted marshmallows and told ghost stories. He started a small foundation for elderly people facing abuse. Quiet donations. Legal help. Safe places to go. He never put his name on it. Richard handled the money. The company shares kept growing. 5 more years passed quietly. John turned 80. The kids grew. Tyler went to college on a baseball scholarship. Sarah started high school and joined the drama club. Emily taught full-time and painted in her spare hours. Her work started selling in local galleries. John's foundation helped over 100 seniors stay in their homes or escape bad situations. He never took credit. Richard sent him updates anonymously. Claire became more than a friend. They traveled to Italy one spring. Sat in cafes in Rome and ate gelato every afternoon. They held hands on sunset walks. Neither wanted to marry again, but they shared holidays and weekends at the lake. Mark remarried a younger woman from his office. They lived in a condo he could barely afford. He saw the kids every other weekend. Tyler tolerated him. Sarah barely spoke. One December morning John woke early. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing Princeton in white silence. He made coffee and sat at the kitchen table watching cardinals at the bird feeder Emily kept filled. Emily came down in her robe. "Morning, Daddy. You okay?" "Better than okay, sweetheart. Just thinking how lucky I am." She kissed his forehead and poured coffee. Later that day the whole family gathered for an early Christmas. Tyler home from college. Sarah excited about her school play. Claire brought her famous pecan pie. Even Richard stopped by with his wife. Presents under the tree. Laughter. Old stories retold. John looked around the room at the people he loved and who loved him back without conditions. He thought about that night years ago when Mark tried to push him out. How small he had felt then. Now he felt large enough to fill the whole house with warmth. After dinner they watched It's a Wonderful Life on the big screen. John's favorite. When George Bailey realized how many lives he touched, John felt tears come. Not sad tears. Grateful ones. Later when everyone slept, John stood at the window watching snow fall again. He whispered to the quiet Nig. He whispered to the quiet night, "Thank you, Margaret, for teaching me how to be strong. Thank you, kids, for giving me reasons to keep going." He turned off the lights and went to bed at peace. John Harrison lived to 91. He passed in his sleep at the lake house one August morning with Claire holding his hand and Emily on the other side. The funeral was small. Family and close friends. No big speeches. His will was simple. House to Emily. Lake house to the grandkids in trust. Money split between the foundation and the kids' futures. At the graveside, Tyler spoke for the family. "My grandfather taught us that real wealth isn't money. It's standing up when someone tries to knock you down. It's loving anyway when you've been hurt. It's building something that lasts." He looked at the headstone next to Margaret's. "We love you, Grandpa. And we'll never forget." Snow started falling again, soft and silent, covering everything in forgiveness. John Harrison had won his quiet victory not by destroying anyone, but by refusing to be destroyed.